Let me tell you the truth most men never hear. Women don't fall in love when you give more. Not when you text her every hour. Not when you constantly check in. Not when you try to always please her. In fact, the more you give too early, the faster she loses interest. Because when something is always there, it doesn't feel special. Women fall in love when they have to feel your absence. Women don't fall in love just because you're always there. They fall in love when they start to feel your absence. Not because you ghost them, not because you play games, but because you're not chasing, you're not begging, you're not making her the center of your world. See, when a man is always available, always texting, always waiting, it doesn't feel special anymore. It feels expected. It feels too easy. And things that are too easy, they rarely feel exciting. But when you stop chasing and start leading your own life, something shifts. When you wake up and focus on your purpose, your growth, your peace, you naturally give less attention to anything that isn't adding real value. And she feels that shift. Suddenly, you're not blowing up her phone. You're not replying in seconds. You're not waiting around to see if she still likes you. You're busy, not pretending to be. Actually busy with real goals, real plans, real focus. That's when she starts to wonder about you. Why isn't he texting like before? Is he thinking about me? Is he losing interest? That space makes her feel something. That mystery makes her curious. And that curiosity turns into interest. Then emotion. Then desire. Not because you gave more, but because you pulled back and let her feel the lack of you. When she sees you're not desperate for her time, because your own time is already valuable, she starts to value you. Because your attention isn't free anymore. Your energy isn't cheap anymore. And now being with you feels like something she has to earn. Not something you throw at her. Not something you give out of fear, but something you offer from strength. That's when she starts to fall. Not when you're available every minute, but when you're present, strong, confident, and just distant enough to keep her reaching. Because the moment she starts to feel your absence, she starts to realize what your presence really meant. Point 1. Too much access kills attraction. When a woman feels like she has unlimited, non-stop access to you, it stops feeling special. Not because you're doing something wrong on the surface, you're being nice, consistent, responsive, but because it's too much, too soon, too easy. If you're always the one texting first, always the one keeping the conversation alive, always the one asking, "Are you okay?" Even when she hasn't shown the same level of energy, you begin to lose that spark in her eyes. She doesn't feel your presence anymore, because she never had to feel your absence. It's human nature. We value what's rare. We crave what creates curiosity. And we feel more for people who don't constantly remind us they're available. You might think texting fast means you care. You might think checking in often means you're showing interest. You might believe being always there makes you different. But to her, it starts to feel like background noise. Like something that's just there but not exciting anymore. There's no pull, no edge, no mystery. Attraction needs a little bit of space to breathe. It needs just enough distance to create tension, to allow her mind to wander, to allow her emotions to reach for you instead of just reacting to you. When you're constantly checking if you did something wrong, when you're constantly trying to fix her silence, what you're really doing is sending the message, "I'm afraid of losing you." And fear is not attractive. But when you pull back, not with attitude, not with punishment, but with calm self-respect, everything begins to change. You stop chasing. You stop proving. You stop pouring your energy into a space that isn't matching it. You focus on your own life, your own mind, your own energy. And without saying a word, she starts to feel it. The air around you becomes more still, more serious, more controlled. You're not trying to impress. You're not trying to get a reaction. You're just living. And now, she's the one feeling the shift. She's the one wondering what's going on. Why isn't he texting like before? Is something wrong? Did I lose his attention? This is where true attraction builds. Not in your presence, but in her awareness of your absence. Because now, your attention isn't just something she gets by default. It's something that feels earned. It's no longer a habit, it's a choice. And when something feels like a choice, not an obligation, it becomes valuable. She'll start to think about you more. She'll replay your last conversation. She'll notice the silence and want to break it. Because the truth is, people don't fall in love with what they fully understand. They fall in love with what makes them feel something. And you give her nothing to feel when you're always there. But the moment you pull back, the moment you protect your energy, she starts to notice. She starts to feel the contrast. She starts to miss what she once overlooked. Not because you're playing games, but because you're finally valuing yourself enough to stop begging to be seen. That's the moment she looks at you differently. That's the moment she realizes your presence was never ordinary. She just needed the silence to finally hear its worth. Point 2. Value comes from distance. Let's be honest, value is not something you tell her you have. It's something she feels when you stop throwing yourself at her like every other guy. And here's what most men don't understand. The more constantly available you are, the more she starts to believe she doesn't have to do anything to keep you around. That's where value begins to fade. Because when a man is always there, always complimenting, always texting, always giving energy, he's unintentionally telling her, "You don't have to earn me, I'll be here no matter what." And at first, that may feel sweet, but over time, it becomes ordinary, expected, easy to ignore. You become the guy she knows, will always be there waiting, and people don't chase what's always waiting. But when your focus is on your purpose, when your life has weight, has motion, has meaning beyond her, your energy shifts. You're not ignoring her, you're engaged elsewhere. In your vision, in your goals, in your growth. And that kind of man doesn't feel like a background option. He feels like someone with momentum, someone with purpose, someone she has to rise up to catch up with. Now she starts to notice you in a different light. You're not texting just to get a dopamine hit. You're not showing up because you're afraid she'll leave. You're living your life and inviting her in only if she brings value to it. And that, right there, that's what makes your presence magnetic. Because your time isn't something that's handed out like a free sample. It's something that has to be earned, and she knows it. When your attention becomes rare, it begins to feel sacred. It no longer feels like a man trying to win her over. It feels like a man who knows his worth and is choosing who gets close to him. That's what turns you into someone unforgettable. Because deep down, women want a man whose world is already full. A man who doesn't need her to survive, but would gladly share his world if she proves she can handle it. And when you stop giving for free, when you stop explaining your worth and simply live it, that's when she starts to lean in. She starts wondering, why is he so calm? Why doesn't he need my approval? Why does his attention feel so different from other guys? It's because you've made it clear, not through words, but through your actions, that your energy is not up for grabs. She has to earn it. She has to meet your standard, not the other way around. And when she finally does feel your presence again, it hits different. Because it's no longer about attention, it's about access. And access to you now feels like a privilege. That's why women fall harder for the man who gives less. Not out of coldness, but out of clarity. Because value doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply exists. And only the right woman will recognize it and rise to meet it. Point 3. Less is not cold. Less is confident. Giving less doesn't mean you've become distant. It doesn't mean you've grown bitter. It doesn't mean you're suddenly emotionless or closed off. It means you've grown up. You've seen what happens when you give too much, too early, too easily. And now, you've chosen to move differently. Because there's a difference between being cold and being calculated with your energy. Most men give too fast, not out of confidence, but out of fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing someone if they don't constantly prove their value. So they overextend. They overgive. They love without boundaries, without balance, without pause. But here's what they don't realize. When you give yourself away too quickly, you teach people to stop valuing you. Because what's always available is rarely respected. And what's given without effort is easily forgotten. If you've ever been that guy, the one who gave everything and still wasn't chosen, you know that pain. You know how it feels to show up 100% for someone who barely gave 20% in return. You know the heartbreak of being available and still overlooked. So now, you give less. Not to punish, not to play games, but to protect your peace, to protect your heart, to protect the version of you that took years to build. People may not understand it. They might say, "You've changed." They might say, "You're distant now." But what they're really saying is, "You've stopped handing me your energy for free. You're no longer showing up for those who vanish when it's inconvenient. You're no longer replying to breadcrumbs with feasts. You're no longer chasing the approval of someone who hasn't earned your presence." Because real confidence isn't loud. It's not needy. It doesn't announce itself. It waits. It watches. It stands still. It says, "I know what I bring, and I no longer need to force it into places where it's not seen." When you choose to give less, you're not withholding love. You're refining who you give it to. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not selfish. You're self-respecting. And that energy, it's rare. It's magnetic. Because it carries a quiet strength that doesn't bend just to be liked. Now, your presence has weight. When you show up, it means something. When you speak, she listens differently. When you give affection, it feels earned, not automatic. And yes, not everyone will understand this new version of you. But that's okay, because not everyone is supposed to have access to him. You've stopped trying to be everything to everyone. And in that, you've become everything to yourself. Now, you only give from a place of overflow, not desperation. And the people who can't handle that, they were never meant to stay. Let them go. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call your boundaries cold. Because your peace isn't up for discussion. Your love isn't up for discount. And your time isn't up for grabs. You've earned the right to be selective. Not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you finally stopped forgetting your own value. And when the right woman comes along, she won't be confused by your confidence. She'll feel safe in it. She'll respect it. She'll rise to meet it. Because what's earned is cherished. And your love, your loyalty, your presence will never be wasted again. Point 4. She falls in love with your control. She doesn't fall in love with how loud your love is. Not with how many compliments you give. Not with how fast you text back. Not with how many times you say, "I miss you," when she pulls away. All of that might make her feel flattered. It might make her feel wanted for a moment. but it doesn't make her respect you. And without respect, attraction doesn't last. She's not moved by desperate words. She's not drawn to emotional chaos. She's not falling for the man who begs to be seen. She falls for the man who already sees him clearly, quietly, powerfully. She falls in love when she sees something she rarely finds in this world. A man who is in control of himself. Your control isn't about dominance. It's not about silence that punishes. It's not about withholding love just to prove a point. It's about emotional maturity. It's about the kind of calm that says, I choose peace over panic. I choose patience over pressure. I choose myself over begging for someone to choose me. When things don't go your way, you don't explode. When she takes space, you don't collapse. When she tests your silence, you don't fill the gap with fear. Instead, you hold your ground. You stay centered. You breathe. Because you've learned something most men haven't. Your emotions are your responsibility, not hers. And when she sees that, when she watches you stay grounded in the middle of uncertainty, she starts to feel safe. She starts to trust. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't do. You didn't panic. You didn't beg. You didn't try to control her. You controlled yourself. That alone sets you apart. Because the truth is most men crumble under the weight of emotional pressure. They chase when she pulls away. They over-apologize even when they weren't wrong. They lose themselves trying to hold on to her. But you don't lose yourself for anyone. You can care about her deeply and still walk away if she disrespects your peace. Not out of spite, but out of discipline. Not out of ego, but out of love for your own soul. You've worked hard to build inner stability. You've fought battles with your own emotions. You've sat with your pain. You've faced your loneliness. And because of that, your peace is earned and not borrowed. It's yours, and it's not for sale. You don't need her to validate you. You don't need her attention to feel secure. You don't need her affection to feel alive. You want her. You appreciate her. But you don't depend on her. That's what makes your presence powerful. Because you bring stillness into her storm. You don't demand that she complete you. You offer her the chance to join a life that's already full. And when she sees that your world keeps spinning whether she's near or not, that you're the same man, whether she texts back or not, that your energy remains strong whether she stays or leaves, she begins to feel something deeper. She begins to respect you. And through that respect, love grows. She realizes you're not just another man seeking a soft place to fall. You're a man who's already built a safe place inside himself. And if she wants to be a part of that space, she has to bring more than beauty. She has to bring peace. Because that's the only kind of love you now accept. You've outgrown the need to fix people. You've outgrown the fear of being left. You've stopped tying your worth to how closely someone clings to you. You're no longer in love with love itself. You're in love with truth, with calm, with quiet strength. And whether she stays or not, you stay the same. Unshaken, unmoved, unapologetically at peace. And that is exactly why she falls. Because while most men try to win her with noise, effort, and overcompensation, you win her with your stillness, with your presence, with your control. Not control over her, but control over yourself. That's the kind of man a woman can't forget. Not because he begged for her attention, but because he never needed it to begin with. Here's something most men were never taught. Because most men were never allowed to be still. The world teaches you to do more, say more, prove more, give more. But the truth is, in love, noise doesn't win, presence does. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be worthy. You don't have to overgive, over-apologize, or overstay in relationships where your value is only noticed after you pull away. Because every time you pour your energy into someone who hasn't earned your presence, you chip away at the very strength that made you desirable to begin with. Real love is never earned through desperation. It's never built on emotional chasing. It doesn't grow in a place where you're constantly having to remind someone of your worth. If you find yourself always trying to prove that you're enough, you're probably with someone who's not ready to receive the kind of love you bring. And that's not always because they're toxic or cruel. Sometimes they just haven't healed. They're addicted to drama. They're used to chaos. They only feel alive when there's uncertainty. So when you offer them something solid, they mistake it for something boring. They confuse consistency with weakness. They see your steady effort, your honesty, your care, not as strength, but as neediness. Not because it is, but because they haven't done the inner work to recognize real love when it's in front of them. And the more you try to convince someone of your value, the more you begin to forget it yourself. You start shrinking. You start waiting. You start overthinking every word, every moment, every message, until you become a version of yourself that even you don't recognize. So what's the truth? You don't need to give more to be loved. You need to give differently. You need to give less to the wrong people, to the ones who only show up when it's easy, the ones who leave when it gets hard, the ones who love attention but run from effort, who crave validation but fear commitment. And to some people, you give nothing at all. No more explanations, no more second chances, not even access, because they've already shown you. They don't respect your boundaries, they don't value your energy, and they don't protect your heart when you place it in their hands. And that's when your silence becomes your loudest message. You stop proving. You stop explaining your absence. You stop showing up where your peace gets drained and your presence is taken for granted. Let her feel your silence. Let her wonder what happened to the version of you she once had easy access to. Let her sit in the quiet that used to be filled with your effort, your care, your attention. Because that absence, it carries more weight than 1,000 "I miss you" texts. That silence, that peace you now protect, it speaks volumes. She will remember. Not because you forced her to, but because the contrast between the man who gave endlessly and the man who now gives nothing is unforgettable. She'll remember how steady you were, how present you were, and how quietly, without anger or drama, you disappeared into a life that now puts you first. She won't remember a man who begged. She'll remember a man who grew. Let her rise. Let her chase. Let her face herself in the silence. Because you're no longer the man who waits for someone to see your worth. You're the man who walks in it. Not out of ego, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You now give with intention. You protect your peace like a treasure. You know that your love is not common, so it should never be handed out casually. Once you become the man who no longer needs to be seen to feel significant, the man who doesn't need validation to feel valuable, you stop chasing love and start attracting something real. And that man, he doesn't need to be loud. He doesn't need to prove. He doesn't need to win, because he already is the prize. And that's the kind of man no woman ever forgets.